going to a haunted town with a really dark history to build this Proton pack. But believe me, it's not going to happen without a few problems and some terrifying surprises. Stay tuned. This is your Geek Fix. If you're the kind of person that can watch videos like this and catch every little ghostly detail, then I've got a challenge for you. Because in this video, we hid 13 ghosts, not including logos. And if you can be the first to email us all 13 time codes to yourgeekfix@gmail.com, you can win a $50 Amazon gift card. Be sure to check out the details below, and in the meantime, happy ghost hunting. There are many stories of haunted towns, but this might be the darkest. In 1860, Spring Ranche, spelled with an E, had a lot of traffic as it was located on the Oregon Trail. And James Baker saw its potential, so he built a house, opened an inn, and started a store, a church, and even a school. And by 1864, Cheyenne and Sioux Indians killed most everybody and burnt the place to the ground. Hi, I'm Jeremy, this is your Geek Fix, and if you thought that was dark, I mean, you haven't even heard the darkest part of the story, the reason why most everyone thinks it's haunted. Oh no. You see, with the opening of the Grand Island train line and Pony Express, Spring Ranche became a bustling town with a train station, post office, store, barbershop, and bank. Now, the haunting of the town and the start of most of the town's problems really started with a brother and sister by the name of Tom Jones and Elizabeth Taylor. Now, they had different last names because Elizabeth was originally married to a man by the name of James Taylor, who shortly after deeding all of his property to Elizabeth, mysteriously died after consuming potato bug poison. And the town didn't like this because Elizabeth was basically the Karen of the time. She was always complaining about everything and seemed to be causing a lot of trouble. In fact, the town said that the family was part of the mob involved in cattle rustling and land grabbing. Her brother or her son was accused of getting a woman pregnant against her will, and Elizabeth was even accused of passive-aggressively having someone's barn burned down. So one story goes that Elizabeth even became paranoid about the town and eventually went out and purchased a handgun. It was a shotgun. That's what it was, a shotgun. And everybody knew this. And one day she saw some men that were working on what she thought was her own property, and during an argument, either Elizabeth or one of her men shot one of their heads off. And she was even seen by people running away back to her home. So there was supposed to be a judge that was going to come to town to deliver some level of justice. But the town couldn't wait for this. They just wanted to get rid of the family. And on March 15th of 1885, between 5 and 50 vigilantes forced them out of their home and took them out to the sandbank under the bridge, where they were placed on horses with nooses around their necks. And it was said that they even used Elizabeth's gun to make the horses run. Other reports were that they just pushed them off the bridge, where they left them hanging for a few days. And people say you can still hear them screaming at night. I don't know why, because this all happened during the daytime, but at the same time, you know what they say, ghosts don't wear watches. After that, the railroad left, and after floods and some other problems, eventually the town died. Most of the remaining buildings are falling apart, and only signs mark where businesses once stood. Between the bridge where they were hanged and the graveyard where they were buried, thousands of people come each year to reenact the events or to talk to their ghosts.
If you want us to leave, make a sound.
And I thought, what a better place to build a Proton pack. Now, I want to say that there's a lot of ways you could do this, and one of the easiest might be to just build it from scratch. But I like to make things that are easily accessible, things that you're more likely to buy or already own. And I was inspired by Paul Sinyon Lee, who's built multiple Proton packs and recommended actually starting with the Spirit Halloween pack. In fact, I decided to do everything Spirit Halloween. I bought the pack, the suit, the goggles, the PKE meter. I even got their radio. I already had the trap, which I broke last year while filming the Ecto 1 upgrade, so be sure to check that out. I want to dress up like Egon, so for that reason I didn't really need the goggles or the trap, but I did need some other costume pieces that they didn't carry. And thanks to our friend Dan Lanigan, who showed me Egon's original pack, I have great reference material. So, let's check out the pack. Now this comes with a Proton pack and the wand, and once when you've got the batteries in, all you have to do is push this button and the wand lights up and has a couple lights there. And then also the cyclotron, as you can see, it's lit up, not screen accurate, I also have my meter back here that's lighting up, but it's not film accurate. This isn't what it would look like or even sound like in the real movie. For example, that sound where it's shutting down, if I just push it for a second and turn it off, it doesn't sound anything like it would in the movie. And so at the same time, I mean, this is still cool. This is about 80% the scale of the real Proton packs, but it's not screen accurate. There's several things on it that need to be tweaked in order for it to be, or to look or act a little bit more screen accurate. And that's really the purpose behind this video, is that I wanted to make mine more realistic, more screen accurate. At the same time, I decided to place some rules on myself. You'll notice in most all my videos, I always put some kind of crazy rules on it. And in this particular case, I decided I didn't want to do anything where I had to actually make the parts myself from scratch. So that means I can't 3D print parts or mill parts or anything like that. I have to go only from the same things that you could purchase more easily online. But luckily, there is a great reference when it comes to Ghostbusters props and being able to make them screen accurate, and that is gbfans. gbfans, as you might guess, is powered by Ghostbuster fans. I mean, true fans, ones that know everything there is to know about these props and what they're made from. In fact, I myself am a member. Last year when I made the Ecto-1, I actually put my 3D models as well as the stickers that I made on gbfans. And that's one of the great things about it is people trying to help each other out. So you'll have things that are free, or people will tell you about things that they found at a good price rather than just keeping it to themselves. There's also those that make and sell things themselves that are screen accurate or more screen accurate that they use to make their own Proton packs. Now this does mean I'll have to do something that I've never done before, and that's I've never bought anything from Etsy. This is going to be my first time buying things from Etsy. I've never done that before. I don't know how it's going to go, but at the same time, most of the people on gbfans do sell their things through Etsy. But I'm also going to be checking Amazon and eBay for a few things. For example, one other thing that I found for my costume that I got through Amazon, but then turned out to be a product made by someone from gbfans, were my elbow pads. In the original Ghostbusters, the elbow pads were actually women's volleyball knee pads. I tried going to the sports store, but they don't make these anymore. Although they do have a Wilson ball made by Wilson, so be aware of that. So luckily, there are some people on gbfans who, through Amazon, were selling a set of these knee pads that they've made themselves, and so that's how I got those. Now, what I'm going to buy isn't exactly what you have to buy. There's a lot of ways that you could do this. You could also go a lot farther than I'm going to go, and you probably paid a lot more money too. But I know that there's a few things that I'm wanting to get. So one of the first things that I know I want to do is to change that lights and sound effect. Both on the wand as well as in the Proton pack itself. And I think the best kit for upgrading this particular pack is actually that one by Frankengeek. And as you can see, they have multiple kits that are in here, which are a reasonable price. But you do need to pay close attention when you're purchasing it based on what your wand tip looks like. If it's clear like mine, that means it's the second edition or the newer version. And so that one has a different motherboard and connectors than the other one does. And the reason to know this is if you only want to replace the lights and sound for, say, the wand or inside the pack, you're going to need to know that, because then your proprietary parts will connect. So they made it so it will connect to the original parts. So you can use your current wand and its parts and connect it to the lights and sound kit. But if you're replacing everything, you don't have to worry about that. You can just grab whatever is most accessible, whatever is available at the time. Of course, when I went in there, only the wand was available. But I sent him an email and he said that he'd make it available for me. So luckily, I'll be able to get it pretty quick. He seems to sell out pretty quickly. So once when you see it's available, make that purchase. The other thing they also have is a vent relay, which is something else I wanted to do. If you ever saw the game, which is canon for the series of movies, Then you saw that whenever the pack was used and overheated, that smoke would come shooting out of that vent relay. And I really thought that looks cool, and a lot of people are doing that with their packs because it's a really cool effect. So I'm also going to get that, and it's only $8. So, and what this does is it relays from the board when the smoke emitter should be shooting out the smoke. And so that's what I want, but at the same time they don't sell the smoke emitter itself. So for that I went to Wasteland Industries, where they sell this really cool end filter, which also has a light up fan, and so it's supposed to work at the level that I need. By the way, you do need to make sure that it stays underneath a certain amount of voltage for it to work with the Frankengeek kit. So yeah, so I'm gonna get that as well. This is kind of expensive. It's also coming from the Netherlands, so hopefully it gets here on time. I also want to replace this cable right here to be more screen accurate. A lot of people are replacing them with a wider cable with a hook. I actually found that on eBay for a good price. Speaking of which, the cyclotron right here bothers me. It doesn't look quite right. That's the one thing that I think catches my eye the most as being inaccurate. It looks too small to me. And also, the bumper is touching. It's all one piece. And so for that reason, I want to get something that makes it look better. And I did find this one right here. This is actually 3D printed Ruby's Halloween Proton Pack Cyclotron and Bumper Upgrade. Which, even if I was 3D printing this, that bumper is actually pretty wide. I think it's questionable that I would have been able to print it in one piece on my 3D printer, but also it's not a bad price, quite frankly, for the amount of PLA and the amount of time it probably took to print it. So let me get that. Now, the way that the wand is supposed to connect with the Proton Pack is by a V-hook. Specifically in the original movie, they used Dixie cup holders, which have these metal pieces, these V-hooks that slide inside of each other. And you can get them sometimes from some of the culinary stores, but I'm having a hard time finding both parts because there is a Spangler's wand out there. They are selling hook parts to be able to connect that to, but I'm having a hard time finding the other one. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it in time. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to upgrade that, since I can't just print it or make it like I typically would. Another thing people seem to be upgrading a lot on this is this right here. This is the crank generator, and it happens to be a part that's a little hard to find, but luckily there are a lot of people out there that have made them, like this one right here. It doesn't look 3D printed because it's actually cast, and it comes in a couple of parts, so I can actually make it a working crank. One of the big details on these also is that it has a clippered valve, which is used in the medical industry where I am, but at the same time, I think I want to order a real one to put on there, even though I know it's going to be a little bit larger. That might help it to fit. I won't be able to find one small enough, I don't think, to replace on the wand, but I think that could be a fun detail. So I'm getting that on eBay. It looks like I'm getting it 2 for 1, really. For 20 bucks, that's a pretty good price. That's about $10 a piece, and you can't do better than that. Because a lot of them will go for about 30, 35. So I got that, but I just realized that the picture has 2 in it, but apparently the description does say it's only 1. So that's my own fault. Another big thing that we have to do is the actual decals that are on here. And I'm actually buying 2 of them because I have one that I kind of like because it has a lot of stickers I can also use for my radio and things. But I also like another one that I found because it has actual metallic stickers for things like the clippered valve. You notice that every time I pick this up, I have the wand on the ground, and that's because this hose is horrible. That is probably my least favorite thing on this right at the moment. It's too stiff, it's uncontrollable. While they do have wire loom hoses at the local hardware store, at the same time they're split. And what I want is one that's not split. So specifically, I'm gonna go ahead and go on to it also for that part and get that. It's not too expensive. The second version of this pack actually has more accurate straps to it, but they're still not great. And the real Proton Pack isn't actually strapped directly to the person. It's actually by way of an Alice pack, which can be kind of expensive, but luckily I found a pretty cheap one here on eBay, but I'll need to get some straps for it. Now I'm sure for safety reasons they didn't put on an ion arm. It's this piece of metal that comes down right here, a rod of metal. But I was able to go to the hardware store and get this copper rod, and I found that even though they didn't include it on the pack, for some reason there is a hole right here for it. It's exactly the size that I need for that arm. So I wonder if they always intended for it to go in there, but at the same time, they didn't put it on. So yeah, that's a perfect fix. Very easy to do. It's hard because there's a lot of things that I know that I want to do or that I could do, but at the same time, I don't have to do everything. The upside to doing this is that you can always add more. You can always tweak it a little bit more. So I think that's about it. All right, so now all my orders are in. Hopefully that's everything I need. And now I just have to wait for it to arrive. So here we are, we're back. It's a little bit later, and I've received a few things. Surprisingly, some of it pretty fast, even though some of it came from the other side of the world. I got my ribbon with my hook, both sets of my labels. My clippered valve also arrived, but I don't like the condition of it, and so I decided to leave it off. Another thing that came was my Alice pack. Look at that, I've already put on my straps, and it fits pretty well. I think this is actually a smaller Alice pack, but at the same time, it should fit onto the back of this pretty well. But before I can do that, right now there's just cardboard basically that they put as the motherboard on the back of this, and so I'm gonna need to pull that off, and I'll use a piece of particle board to replace it. Also, I went back to the hardware store and got some of this pipe insulation, which will go right here on the top of that Alice pack. And then I also got some of these longer zip ties to strap it down. So next, what I'm gonna need to do is to take this apart, modify it for my new parts, and then paint it so that it's ready to be assembled. So if you're to take this apart, the one thing I'd recommend is to keep the screws and make sure you put them back into the parts, so that when you go to put them back onto the Proton pack, you won't have to go searching around for which screws fit best. Next, I'm going to take my parts and sand them. I also used Tamiya putty to fill the gaps and sanded it again. Then I sprayed everything with a metallic paint. And then I sprayed it with a flat black. Next, I can use a credit card to scrape off the paint where I wanted it to be weathered. I only wanted my pack to be somewhat weathered, so I didn't go overboard with a lot of washes or metallic paints. So my Freaking Geek kit also arrived. I decided to test it before putting it in the pack. It takes 6 AA batteries, and when I flip this switch, the emitters light up and sound comes on. Then the power cell lights appear. If you remember, before it was just a flashing blue light. When I flip this switch, it turns on the sound and the lights for the one. When I push this button, the Proton stream sound and lights appear. There's also an SD card that comes with it, which contains all the sounds and allows me to switch over and play music, and to switch songs by using the trigger button. Now this is currently in cinematic mode. If I set it to game mode, the lights and the sounds are different, and my smoke emitter will become active. Although when I first put it together, it didn't work, and so I wrote the guy at Freaking Geek and said, hey, is it the relay or is it the board? Something's wrong. I only had 24 hours to get it done. And they wrote me back and said, well, did you calibrate it in game mode like it says on page 11 of the instructions? And the answer was no, because I didn't read the instructions on that page. So if you do this, I highly recommend read page 11. Now, Wasteland does sell a splitter that you can use that will make all of the smoke come out of those holes pretty evenly, but I missed my opportunity to do that, and it was too late for me to order anything, and so I kind of pushed the rules by designing a splitter, which I'll provide the link for in the description below, which will fit a 1/2-inch hose on the outside and a 1/4-inch hose on the inside, and works pretty great. But to get around the rules, I paid somebody else to print it, so there you go. Similarly, I bought this cast piece for my shock mount, but wanted to make it more realistic and metallic. So I went over to the hardware store where I bought some thick washers and some thin washers and altered those to make this a shock mount, which looks a lot more realistic, and I like it a lot. However, I think I'm just going to use the cast piece in the meantime to hold everything together, and then I'll switch it out when we get to Spring Ranch. But with all that complete, we better be going. You are now listening to the podcast for geeks and the stuff they love, where each week we'll talk about everything from anime to movies, games, and prop collecting with the people who create and love it. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Vince.
I'm James.
And this is your Geek Fix. No, I just wanted to get a Coke Icy. Thank you. Hi. It's for a video. Yeah. You ever heard of Spring Ranche? Oh, really? So, according to the people at McDonald's, the bridge they thought, or Spring Ranche they thought, was where a witch was burned. They didn't know anything about the hanging stuff, which is probably for the best, but at the same time raises a question about how much people actually know about Spring Ranche. I'm just realizing I think I forgot my boots and, more importantly, those elbow pads. For all that work to get the stinking elbow pads, left them at home. So the weird thing is, I've been here a few times, and every time I drive here, it's weird because you start out in the light up at the freeway level, and then as you go down, it just gets darker and darker and darker.
Your phone needs a mobile or Wi-Fi
then
connection
my phone
first.
signal is completely gone. So when you first enter town, you see remains of what used to be, including the old train depot that's falling apart. There's actually a place where you can get information, and I got this book right here. And it's there that I got to learn about two types of people that are in the town. Those that are trying to preserve the old buildings, including this old town hall that's not only still standing, but still in use today. And then there's those that own several of the buildings, but don't want anything done with them.
That's about as close as we can come to it.
Which is too bad, because you can tell that they'd be really cool. The only things left are chimneys, pieces of wood, and signs that tell you where things used to be. The only thing left of the old bank is the cement safe. Eventually you get to the site where everything happened. Even the old bridge where Elizabeth and Tom were hanged is not only still standing, but in use, where cars still go over it. Which is scary because even though it can be beautiful, as you can see, the boards are not exactly solid or reliable. From underneath, you can see even better how structurally unsound the bridge has become. And quite frankly, it's really creepy. I can see why people are scared by it. The river still flows and has a lot of fish in it. And I'm not sure on what side of the bridge Tom and Elizabeth were hanged. But even today, there's fishermen that say they've seen their ghosts or heard them screaming. But but we're going where the ghosts are even more likely to be. The Spring Ranche Cemetery.
So here we are, and as soon as I got here, we've gone from sunny and clear to overcast, and the clouds are moving through, and it's supposed to be 60 degrees, and instead it's freezing cold out here. But I'm here in the graveyard technically. Over here we have a small graveyard, and over here I've got the actual graveyard where Tom and Elizabeth and James are all buried. So I figured what a better place, kind of in the parking area, to assemble this, and I've got to do it quick because it's only going to get darker and I'm afraid it might start raining. So some of this I've already put together, and the reason for that is because I realized that I needed to still make my motherboard, and I forgot to do that until the last second. So I did have to put a lot of it together just to know the layout of that, but everything else I'm ready now to connect and hook in. This is my Wasteland Smoke, which can be refilled, and it wants to be about 90% is where you want to have it. It's getting really, really cold and windy out here. So the biggest issue I've got right now is that I keep losing parts. Some are blowing into the grass, and then when I get down on the grass and look around, I can't find them. And so I'm gonna have to go short and just hope that this is enough to hold things together. So I made the motherboard kind of hastily, and it seemed to fit when I tested it earlier, but at the same time now that I've got it on there, the screws and the backing, no matter how you put it, it seems like it's not quite fitting.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Really? You're scared? And the answer is, yeah, but not of ghosts. I'm afraid of the things that I know are out there, the things that I know typically live in that kind of area. So here are the 3 things I'm afraid of in ascending order. Number 3, mountain lions. That's right, Nebraska, where there are no mountains, there are mountain lions. And they tend to live in areas like this because they tend to live off of the other 2 things that I'm afraid of, which are number 2, deer. Sure, they're cute to look at from a distance, but I've had a few experiences, always in areas like this, where they're in the woods, I don't see them, they hear me, they get scared, and instead of running away, they always run right at you. Like, right directly at you. And you never realize how big and powerful they actually are until one nearly runs you over. And finally, number 1, wild turkeys. That's right, wild turkeys. These aren't like little turkeys that you see when you go to somebody's farm or to the zoo. No, they're big, dark, nearly flightless birds that do fly specifically into trees. And then sometime in the night, for, I don't know, because they are too big or because they're sleeping, will fall out of the tree, hit the ground, scream, and run away. So yeah, I'm afraid of turkeys. So don't go alone. Most of these things will leave you alone if you have a buddy with you.
Oh man. All right. Now just to get on my Alice pack, need to tighten those on. And now of course with it getting completely dark, I gotta still put on some of my decals, which I'm starting to think I should have put on before I put together the Alice pack, but it's all good. Oh, and the shock mount. I almost forgot the shock mount. Probably forgetting something else, but as far as I know, that's it.
So there you go. It seems like it works and everything looks pretty nice on it. Here's some better views of some of the parts. Also, if you're wondering what it looked like with the pads and everything on, here's a couple of pictures. We want to thank Kev Murphy, who made this Ecto 1 upgrade from our video last year, and Mad Chuck Adventures, who made this awesome diorama with his modified Ecto 1. Finally, Norman Gagnon made this scratch-built Proton pack and R2 from things he found around the house. We'd also like to see some of your projects, so please send them to yourgeekfix@gmail.com. We'll be doing a lot more prop building and traveling, so if you're interested in seeing more, make sure that you click that subscribe button and also hit that reminder bell so you know when new content comes out. In the meantime, like, subscribe, comment below. This was your Geek Fix.